Well, good evening to Harambe Radio. I'm Roberta Franklin, sitting in, I guess, for nobody. This is the Journey for Justice Hour, and we're so grateful to be here tonight. And I'm so nervous, and I can understand that. I do a talk show myself every day in Montgomery, Alabama. But we've been so generously given an hour by Jelani and Harambe Radio to promote the march and talk about some things concerning our Journey for Justice March. And I've got a guest at the beginning of the show, and her name is, I'll let her tell you who she is. Tell everybody who you are.
This is Sherry Swiney. I'm with the Patrick Crusade, and we are co-sponsoring the march in Washington, D.C. on August 13th. When the word first came out that people were interested in doing something to, let the public know about what's actually happening inside the prisons in our country, we collectively thought that we should have a march in Washington, D.C., because that's the focal point of the United States. And, having a march in Washington, D.C. sounded like a very good idea to me, and it was high time that we did something like this. There's been some local affairs and events in the state of Alabama and in other states, I'm sure. But to have all of the states come together collectively was a real challenge and something that I thought was an excellent idea. We had tried many times before in the past to get other organizations to work together, and there's always been kind of a little problem with that. But in this case, all of the organizations felt the same way. We all jumped together, we all worked together, and put the word out, and the response was overwhelming. So we immediately knew that this was a go, and this was a good idea, and this was actually going to happen.
Yeah, we had a shoestring budget. We had no budget.
And we had no budget at all. We had no money at all. We had, we're not, the Patrick Crusade and Roberta's organization, the family members of people incarcerated, otherwise known as family members of inmates, FMI, neither one of us are funded. So everything that we do basically comes out of the pockets of the individuals who are members of these groups.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're just excited about it. And I want to talk a little bit tonight about, because until I really got involved, I was just, I'm a former teacher of 13 years and got into talk radio really as a fluke, and would get letters from inmates and all. And I was sitting there saying sometimes, yeah, right, Jennifer, I bet you are. And that was my attitude. I didn't think that there were people in prison that had been framed. I didn't think there were people still in prison from the 60s, residual people from Panthers and SNCC and all these politically minded organizations. I didn't think any of that went on. And when I started to investigate the prison industrial complex here in Alabama, I was shocked, Sherry, at the numbers of dollars that were coming into Alabama prison, but they were always crying broke. So did that shock you? And let's talk a little bit about the money that they make. Start with the phone system, or just give us an idea of some of the revenue that is generated by inmates and their family members.
Yeah, actually the family members of prisoners take the brunt of the expenses to run the prisons, and the prisons aren't run very effectively in the first place. And so since there's been so much incarceration, actually mass incarceration, all of the prisons in Alabama and now most of the prisons in the entire country are very overcrowded. And so the funds that are raised or spent by the families are actually being, robbed. And I call it extortion because there's things like the telephone system, for example. The cost of the telephone calls are, like you said before, 3 to 5 times higher than the normal citizen has to pay. And there's a lot of disinformation that is spread around the internet with stories about prisoners calling people and setting up crime and so on. And the fact of the matter is, prisoners cannot call anyone who is not on their approved list, and they can only call, for the most part, they can call collect to the family the family and the friends that are on that approved list.
Right.
When they make that phone call, the cost of that call, you have a surcharge of about $3 for each call, and then you have as much as 35 to 50 cents a minute, depending on how far away you are. If you're local in Alabama, if you're local, it's $2.85 for a 15-minute call, when a citizen doesn't pay anything for a local call. If you're long distance, I know I've received phone calls that have been as much as $21 for 15 minutes.
Yes.
You know, and then in the middle of the phone call conversation, there's recordings that interrupt the phone call, so you can't really have a conversation. You can't really have a 15-minute conversation. You have about 5 minutes of recordings to deal with, front and back of the phone call and in between. So you're really only talking about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So if you're in the middle of a case, for example, or if you're in the middle of a problem, then and you're not finished in 10 minutes, well, then you have to have that person call you back 2 or 3 times to get the information you need. So that gets real expensive, and that is on the backs of the family members and the friends of people who have someone in prison. And
we're doing the research for this march and the ad book. We discovered that there was an estimated $1 billion made on the prison phone systems in this country.
Alone, yeah.
That was just the phone system. And when we get into other revenues, the work release programs bring in millions and millions of dollars all over the country.
Yeah. Actually, the whole idea of selling to prisons. You know, people think that we abolished slavery a long time ago. That's not true. Instead of, to me, the name has changed. They're not slaves; they're prisoners. But they are actually slaves. They're working under slave labor. You know, they might make 25 cents a day. Some of them might make 75 cents a day. But that goes into their prison account, and then out of that account, they have to pay their own way for doctors and food and clothes. And the public doesn't know that. The public thinks that the state provides, 3 hops and a cot and everything is fine. And that's not the truth. The truth of the matter is that the inmates have to pay for most of their way. And if they don't have somebody from the outside sending them money, or they don't have a job inside, then they're just out of luck.
This is the Journey for Justice Hour. I'm Roberta Franklin, along with Sherry Swiney. We're so glad to be a part of this tonight. I want to also talk about the growing trend of private prisons. Initially, it wasn't as strong as it is now. But Sherry, what does it say to you when companies like American Express and Eddie Bauer want to get involved in prison? What does that mean to you?
Well, the truth of the matter is that the prison industrial complex is not about crime. It's about money. It's about revenue. If the prisons actually worked and functioned like the penal code was designed for in the first place, all of these people that are making their living off of the prison industrial complex would be out of a job. And so, prison is actually a big business. It's high on the stock market. The joke in the stock market is, this is an industry that's a real safe bet because, they're never going to go out of business. They're not going to have any layoffs. They're not going to have any shutdowns. They will always have prisoners. And the fact of the matter is that the business is running off of a commodity, like all businesses do, but the commodity in this case is human beings.
Human beings. I think one of the most interesting things about private prisons is when they locate a town that they want to locate in, they go and talk to the city fathers and city officials and state officials and say, look, we want to build a private prison. What's our chances of keeping it full? Because like you say, the commodity is the human being. What is the frightening aspect of that to me is somebody says, we're going to fill you up. And I've always wondered, how could they say that and nobody's been to court yet? You know,
well, yeah, they can say that. I mean, it's like build it and they'll come. They know that because of the laws that are in existence right now and the laws that are going to be in existence as time rolls along, continues to take our rights away and, you know, continues to put more people in prison. So they can pretty well be sure that those prisons are going to be full. You know, there's no question about it.
I had a conversation with you and my friend Brian Stevenson the other day. He emailed me and said that he was running around Congress because they're trying to abolish habeas corpus, and I didn't know what that meant. And you explained that to me, and the way you explained it to me, it's a frightening thought. So how important is it for us, activists, organizations, family members, to keep up with the laws? Because tell everybody what that will mean if they actually abolish habeas corpus.
Yeah, this is called the Terrorist Death Penalty Enhancement Act of 2005, and it's otherwise known as H.R. 3035. And what this does, the habeas corpus it's actually the legal vehicle to challenge the conviction, so that if you're innocent and you're convicted, you have this vehicle to go to court on a habeas corpus and challenge that conviction and prove your innocence. Let me just back up a little bit. Technically, when you are accused of a crime and you become a suspect, you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. After you're convicted, then you are guilty until you are proven innocent, and that's a sad fact. People that are fighting their cases need to really understand that. So the habeas corpus is actually the vehicle that is used to go to federal court and contest that case, to challenge that conviction. Now, what they want to do is actually get rid of that. They've had a lot of exonerations from capital crimes. I mean, the last count I saw was something like 235 people since 2003 have been exonerated, and now that kind of gives the states a bad name. So, you know, they don't really want that. So the answer is, let's not have any more of these cases come out in the public. Let's just abolish the habeas corpus so we can keep everybody in there.
People couldn't challenge a conviction in court?
Not if they pass this bill, they won't.
I mean, how is it these things are kept so silent? Because until I heard about it from Brian Stevenson, I didn't know that was going on. So it is going to be very important that out of this march and out of this national committee we hope to form, that there's going to be a dedicated group that's going to actually keep up with the whatever laws, because they'll sneak them in on us.
This particular, they snuck the Patriot Act in on us, 1 and 2, and probably they want to do this too. If this bill passes, that's the end of this country. That is the end of the constitutional protections that we have.
Wow.
Because the habeas corpus is, see, what I don't understand is how they can pass a bill like this without a constitutional amendment. I haven't finished reading all of it, so I don't know all of the particulars, and I'm sure that Brian does. But this is a very dangerous thing, and most people don't really keep up with it. They don't understand it. They don't even know what a habeas corpus is.
Brian. Thank God for people like Brian and like yourself.
Well, there's not enough of us that can get the word out quick enough. I mean, I would think that some of the major organizations that get a lot of votes, like Move On, would be advertising this and telling people to vote against it. But I haven't seen anything from them yet, and I'm surprised at that, because this is a very dangerous situation if that bill is passed.
All right. I want to remind everybody one more time, if you would like to call in and join in our conversation, if you have a question or comment, feel free. Give us a call at 1-800-335-9818. That's 1-800-335-9818. You don't have to limit your question or comment to what we're talking about, but we would love for you to join in. That's 1-800-335-9818. Let's talk a little bit about your husband's case, if that's okay.
Okay, but before we do that, I just wanted to let everybody know that if they'd like to read more on this habeas corpus bill, they can go to thepatrickcrusade.org. Click on news articles, and it's right there on that page. It's under the United States news articles. So if you want to read up on it, that's the place to go. It tells you who to write to and what to do and what this bill is all about. It's really important, and I hope that a lot of people will go take a look at it.
Right, absolutely. And don't forget, if you would like to be a part of the Journey for Justice March, go to journeyforjustice.org. Tell everybody about Patrick Swiney and his case, please.
Oh, wow. Patrick Swiney is my husband, and he was convicted of a double murder. He was actually framed for this murder. We have proven that he was not the shooter and could not have been the shooter. We've proved that scientifically through forensic testing of gunshot residue. The case started about 10 years before the killings took place. Patrick was a police officer, and he was assigned to an undercover investigation for a drug ring down in Gulf Shores, Alabama. And his report that he turned in to the federal government was instrumental in getting two high officials, a district attorney and the chief investigator for the sheriff's office, convicted of drug smuggling and racketeering. They went to federal prison for this, and about 10 years after that, Patrick's then wife and her ex-husband were shot and killed, and the killings were pinned on Patrick. What the police, who were his colleagues, this is a betrayal, really. What the police did and the district attorney in Shelby County, Alabama, did was that they created a crime scene that was really based around the movements that Patrick made that night. It had nothing to do with what actually happened that night. What we did was Patrick's team recreated the crime scene according to the transcripts of the trial, and we tried to get the evidence from the state, but they wouldn't let us have it. So we purchased a weapon that was identical to the one they said was used. We reenacted the entire crime scene. We videotaped the whole thing, and we had the protocol set up by Dr. Glenn Larkin, who is a pathologist, forensic pathologist. And then once those tests were done, we sent all of the samples to Dr. Nordby in Washington State. And Dr. Nordby is a forensic scientist, and his reputation is impeccable, and he does most of his work for the FBI. And in fact, we are only his third private clients. You know, he read about the case and he said, "Yeah, I'll do this." So his testing proved that there isn't a single person alive who can shoot that particular weapon and not be absolutely covered with gunshot residue. So once we knew that, then we knew that the state of Alabama forensic report that said they couldn't find any gunshot residue on Patrick and they couldn't find any blood on him meant that he could not have been the shooter. So you can't shoot that particular weapon. It's a Charter Arms 22 caliber semi-automatic rifle. It's one of those little fold-up rifles that you can put in a case, and it's used for survival. A lot of pilots used to get that kind of rifle when they go flying in case they crashed or something like that. And that's what he used his for. Was he had been a pilot as well, and he took it with him when he would fly. So that rifle had never been tested by the state, and the whole thing is just the whole testing that the state did is actually a sham. This is real interesting, and I don't know how they got away with it, but back in 1987 when the shootings occurred, they tested Patrick for gunshot residue. Well, they tested for an element called antimony, and they didn't find any, so then they said that the test was inconclusive. And they said, well, when it's inconclusive, it doesn't mean that he shot the weapon, or it doesn't mean he didn't shoot the weapon, but they elected to say that he did. And then interestingly enough, we found out that Remington Company, did not put antimony in their gunpowder until 2 years later. So the Alabama lab actually tested for something that they knew did not exist, and they did that so they could say that the test was inconclusive.
So with all of the scientific proof, and I've seen it, by the way, and read it from page to page, with all of the scientific proof that you have, why does the state of Alabama still hold Patrick Swiney?
That's a real good question. The circuit court, the county court, that's the district court. The county court didn't want to even look at the testing. They didn't even want to talk to the scientists, but instead they wanted to go with their own scientist from their own lab that came up with this antimony story. And I don't understand why they wouldn't look at it, other than they're corrupt.
Yeah.
And then the next court, which was the Alabama Court of Appeals, they denied looking at it, or they denied the case. They didn't want to look at it. And then the next court, the Alabama Supreme Court, denied the case, and they did it on a one-page document that they didn't even give an opinion or a comment. So now we're off to the federal court, which is kind of where we wanted to be in the first place, because we think and hope that we'll actually get fairness when we submit the habeas corpus to the federal court. Now, you see, if that bill were passed, we wouldn't be able to do that.
Wow. I want to look now, shift a little bit and look at what they do to juveniles here in this country. And I think this is some of the most horrendous stuff that could actually happen. One of the most recent atrocities my friend Pam Thrasher sent me involves an 11-year-old girl who threw a rock because some boys were picking on her. And she hit him in the head with the rock, and they are charging her with a felony. For 5 days, she was locked up, couldn't see her parents but for 30 minutes the next day. An ankle bracelet was placed around this child, and the DA is refusing to drop any charges or to not charge her with a felony. I look back at Christopher Thrasher's case, complicity, wasn't even on the scene, any of that, and given life without. That's a mother's nightmare. I think about that case so much ever since I've been involved with that. That's one of the cases that have just stuck with me. I look at the young man in Florida. I look at all these juveniles. I mean, what is it saying to you, Sherry, that we, and I know some people say, well, these kids are bad, they are this, and they should, but at what point we charge kids as adults, but now these same kids cannot vote, they cannot drink, they can't go to nightclubs, so therefore they cannot drive. So they're saying that they do not have the adult capacity of thinking to do either of those, but yet and still we charge them as adults in the courtroom. So what does that say to you as it relates to our justice system?
Well, to me, I mean, that whole thing is absolutely ridiculous. You remember when we were kids. I remember when I was a kid. Kids have fights. Kids, pick on each other. Kids throw rocks. Sometimes an accident happens, and it's an accident, and that's the key word. But nowadays, the district attorneys they're thirsty for filling up the prisons, and I think this all goes back to this whole business of prison being big business. When you take children and charge them as adults, no, they don't have the mental capacity for reasoning like an adult should. That's why they can't vote, that's why they can't drive, that's why they can't drink, that's why they can't smoke until they're a certain age. And yet, at 11 years old, they're going to charge this little girl for throwing a rock and accidentally hitting somebody in the head. Well, thank God that he didn't die, because then she'd probably be on death row. I mean, this is a sick society, in my opinion, where people are calling kids bad. Children are not being raised with love and nurturing.
I can't interrupt you because we're at break time. I just thought about that. We got to take a break.
Okay.
And pay some bills at Harambe Radio.
Okay.
This is the Journey for Justice Hour. I'm Roberta Franklin, along with my very good friend Sherry Swiney, and we'll be back in a minute. We're back. This is the Journey for Justice Hour. I'm Roberta Franklin, along with Sherry Swiney of the Patrick Crusade, and we invite you. It's so quiet. We're not getting calls. Our numbers are 1-800-335-9818. That's 1-800 toll-free number, by the way, 1-800-335-9818. And we are so grateful to Harambe Radio, Jelani, and everybody there. We thank you so much for giving us this time to promote the Journey for Justice March, and we'll be doing that all the way up until the March, August 13th. And again, for all of the Jelani fans and Empress Chi fans, they'll be with us August 13th at Lafayette Park in Washington, D.C., and we invite you, if you're able, to come out and stand with us and say enough is enough. We'll be there demanding some changes, demanding that the criminal justice system and the prison system as we know it, simply, there has to be some changes. There got to be some changes. If you'd like more information, please go to journeyforjustice.org. That's journeyforjustice.org, or you can go to the Patrick Crusade. Give them your website, Sherry.
It's patrickcrusade.org, and at the bottom of the right-hand corner is all of the Journey for Justice information. You can link there, and that'll take you over to Journey for Justice.
Absolutely.
And also there's, I want to talk about some of your situation too, Roberta, if we get a chance. But also on that website, there's, up at the top, at the left-hand side, there's a link to the Patrick Crusade Forum. It says PC Forum, and there people will find information about transportation to Washington, D.C. if they need a ride, or if they have open space in their vehicle or their bus or whatever, to get to Washington, D.C. to help other people get there.
Right.
I invite everybody to go and take a look at that, and Journey for Justice has put a link on their website back to the forum, so we've got it covered at both ends, to help people get there.
We got to say hello to some friends. We got to say hello to Nora at the November Coalition, of course to Leona, who first introduced us to Harambe Radio. Good evening to you, Leona, Carol, and Marcy, and just all the people that have worked so hard to help bring this event about. And that has been a journey in itself. I found that there are not a lot of people who support inmates, our brothers and sisters who are incarcerated. So whenever you get a chance, just tell them thank you, because it's a hard fight. It's a hard battle, because when anything is a billion-dollar industry, they don't just sit back and allow you to walk in and just take that away from them. Along with that comes some challenges and egos and all of that. So it has been a journey, but we're so grateful that we've met some wonderful people along the way, people like Delani, Empress Chi, who have just been never said no to a Sherry, never, from day one.
That is so wonderful to have all of the cooperation that we've had.
Yes.
And you mentioned something, Roberta. I would really like the audience to know what the state of Alabama has been trying to do to you, to you personally, and I think that it's an effort to stop the march, which is impossible to do because the momentum is already there. There's too many people who are committed to this. But if I could interview you for a second, would you tell the audience just what happened to you? And we've got a letter campaign on your behalf, and there's a link on the homepage of the patrickcrusade.org that is displaying the letters that people are writing as they come in, letters to the judge to thank him for actually being fair with you, which is very rare in Alabama for sure.
But, yeah, well, basically, Sherry, if anybody does know, you know that any time it seems as if I or you or we collectively do a major event, I usually go to jail.
You get arrested.
That's just a fact.
And yeah, that's because you're exposing some real important facts, and you're exposing some real important truth, and the government there in Alabama doesn't like that.
I think they've sunk to an all-time low this time. I think they're running out of things. I've always been very, very honest about my past on the radio. I've always shared with my listeners that I'm a recovering addict. I've been sober for 18 years. But sadly, in my honesty, I've given them ammunition to come at me with. This latest charge, just a few days ago, they charged me and made me look as if I was the food stamp thief of the country.
Of the country, yeah. yeah.
That's
the most ridiculous thing that I've ever heard.
And they charged me under the wrong charge.
They actually wanted to charge you and put you in jail.
And the actual charge is theft of property, too. They were in such a hurry to charge me. They charged me under the wrong charge. And you know, that's public information. So anybody can pull that indictment. They've charged me with theft of property, too. So when I was on my way down, when my son told me the sheriff was looking for me, I'm like, theft of property, too? I haven't stolen anything from anybody. So when I get down and read the actual indictment, what they said is, due to a drug conviction in 2003, I failed to report the drug conviction. As a result of that, they paid me $368 too much of food stamps.
Yeah.
Now, from what I'm hearing, most people, if they have an overpayment for whatever reason, are allowed to pay that back, or their food stamps are withheld. Well, I haven't received food stamps in over a year, and only received them for about 9 months since we've been tabulating. And it was during the time that I got fired from a job, of whatever the reason. They say I failed to report a drug conviction, so therefore they overpaid me $368. Well, when I first got the letter, I think I told you about that then. I got the letter saying you've been overpaid, so somebody suggested, well, put it in writing and offer to pay them back. Well, I did. I was so shocked to get a letter back saying, no, you cannot pay it back. We're going to turn it over to the Attorney General's office. I'm still never thinking that the big, bad Attorney General, Troy King of the state of Alabama, who was just in one of the biggest cases Alabama has ever had with Mr. Kinechie, a millionaire, he didn't win that either, would come after me for that?
Well, sure, because you talked against him, and you have a right to do that. Every citizen has a right to do that, even if they don't agree, even if the officials don't agree, because they are public figures. You have that right, but they do not have a right to retaliate against you and to maliciously prosecute you and falsely arrest you.
Yeah.
You know, I really think you should sue the whole state of Alabama and own it for this.
Well, I was making some very negative comments about him because juries would decide that somebody would get life. He'd go back in and demand that they change it to, so that they would be executed. He wanted the death penalty. Then they were doing things like intervening on parole, particularly the Thornton brothers' parole. They had served 22 years of a sentence, no matter what the crime, and personally, we don't believe that they've ever been guilty. But even if they were, a parole board said, after 22 years, we're going to free you. Well, they went in and they revoked that. And I thought that was wrong, so I said something to him about that. We had a verbal conversation at the actual parole hearing. So I guess this is his way of saying, well, not only will I do that, I'll also put you in prison. And that's what he's attempting to do, because based on my past, if I am convicted on that, I stand to serve 15 years for $368 worth of food stamps.
Yeah, and see, the fact of the matter is that they knew about your former drug conviction, which was bogus in the first place, which was the result of that last convention that we put on.
People were calling me from California that knew about it, so I knew they knew about it.
Yeah. I mean, when you have a letter from the DHR saying, because of the drug conviction, we're going to reduce the amount of food stamps that we give to you for your child,
and what's really
they knew about it.
What's really interesting, I get a letter on the drug conviction, and I scan that and send it to you.
I got it.
Where they dismissed the case.
Yeah.
So I either got a drug conviction or I don't.
Yeah.
I understand we have a caller, Beverly. How you doing? Okay. Let's see. We're going to see if we can get Beverly on and talk with her. And in the meantime, remind you.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm unable to hear you very well.
Okay. But we can hear you.
Hi. How are you?
Hi. How are you? How are you?
Oh, I am doing fine. I'm sorry. My phone, I'm unable to hear you. Well, I just wanted to call in because I've been listening to both of you talk, and as you know, I have the organization Foundation for Justice, and it covers a lot of what you guys have been talking about tonight.
Great. That's great.
Which is absolutely wonderful because we're going to be there. We're going to be there, of course, to support. Okay, the march.
That is good.
And the reason we're going to be there, of course, are a lot of the issues you guys have already talked about. Okay, and we wanted to make sure that some of the issues that we have, and as both of you might be aware, I don't know if your listeners are, that we work a lot with the medicational issues for inmates. I mean, the fact that they cannot get the proper medical care in the prison system.
That's a big problem.
I started this with the mentally ill, and it has become huge to the point that I'm taking on all patients in the prison system because no one in there is properly cared for.
No, they're not.
Especially in Texas. I mean, we want to talk about Texas for a minute because
is that where you're
we've
from?
got this heat problem, and there is no air conditioning in Texas, contrary to popular belief. We have people dying in there because when they do get medication, they are not supposed to be exposed to extreme elements such as extreme cold or extreme heat.
Right.
So we have these people on heart medications and that have diabetes and mental health problems and many more issues, health issues, that literally die. They bake to death in there because of their medication. The medication turns on them metabolically, causing them to die. We approached this subject many years ago. We're not even hearing anymore these deaths or, these issues happening where they're making these people work out in the fields in the heat. It's not even in the news anymore. It has just become that blatant here. It's just not even newsworthy.
Well, Beverly, are they taking this to court, to any courts?
I wish I could hear you. Should I continue?
Yeah, go ahead and continue.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I cannot hear you, but thank you for allowing me to speak because I just wanted to add, like I said, as I heard both of you speaking about the issues and about gathering everyone together to work together on these problems.
Right.
Because these problems are affecting everyone, not just the prisoners, but the families, the children, the wives, the mothers. This is affecting everybody in this country.
Absolutely.
And that is why we need this march, and we need to bring these issues up, because we need to speak out and let them know that we're not going to tolerate this anymore.
That's right.
These are our family members.
Mm-hmm.
And what they are doing is illegal, unconstitutional, and it is wrong.
You're absolutely right. Thank you, Beverly.
Thank you very much.
For calling. We're going to talk about the medical situation.
God bless you both.
Thank you.
Hi, Beverly. Yeah, the medical situation we know what the medical situation is in Alabama, and of course I know what they are in Texas as well because I've worked with Beverly for many years.
Texas has one of the worst systems, I think, equal to Alabama, if not worse.
Yeah, it's a shame that she couldn't hear us because we could have had a good conversation on that. Hello?
Yeah,
Oh, I thought I lost you. Yeah, what she was saying about the fans and, they're not, they're in lockup and baking in the heat, in the Texas heat, which is just as bad as Alabama heat and humidity. And the medication that they're taking, of course, is in fact killing people.
Absolutely.
And now we know in Alabama, to get medical care, the medical care in Alabama is a complete joke.
Yeah.
I mean, you've heard case after case after case, and so have we.
No, that's how I started with the medical situation at the women's prison at Tutwiler.
Mm-hmm.
Our number's here, by the way. Let me give it out again, Sherry. 1-800-335-9818. That's 1-800-335-9818. This is the Journey for Justice Hour, and we invite you at this time to join us in Washington, D.C., for the Journey for Justice March. We'll be at Lafayette Park at 9 o'clock that morning, but on the 12th, we'll be at City Hall for a welcome reception where we want to meet and greet all of you. Beverly, I'm looking forward to meeting you and having some good conversations. And another thing, this march is not going to be, and I was sharing that with Delani when I first was speaking with them about this, I don't want this to be a march, Sherry, where we march in Washington and go home. We want this to be a march where we've started a national committee, so we're asking you to start thinking about being a part of that. We want representatives from every state in this country, and we're going to come together and show the impact and the power of family members, activists, organizations who are voters, taxpayers, consumers, who can come together and say enough is enough.
Yeah, I actually believe that the American people are good people, basically, except for the thugs that happen to be in government. But the American people are good people, good-hearted people at the core.
But they
just don't know what's going on. And I have a deep-seated belief in my heart that if they actually knew what was going on, I don't think they would stand for it. I don't think they would stand for their tax money supporting torture, their tax money supporting innocent people in prison, their tax money supporting the medical abuse and people dying when their sentence is not death. I mean, if a person can go into prison with say a 5-year sentence, okay, and they could end up dying there because of a disease that they've contracted there while they're in prison because the sanitary conditions are, another joke. They could get raped, and I know so many cases where the person gets raped. If he turns around and defends himself and ends up killing the guy that raped him, then he's on death row. That's really, really wrong. They're not protected, and they're supposed to be protected because they're under the state's care. That's their responsibility.
They had some of the most horrendous cases. When we asked the Southern Center for Human Rights to come into Alabama, just one example was a woman in Tutwiler Prison who weighed 80 pounds because she had been waiting for teeth for 3 years.
Yeah.
One woman's hemorrhoid had grown to the point that you could see them protruding from the back of her pants. One woman had ovarian cancer, and they were giving her Tylenol, and on a good day, they'd give her a Motrin. The infections at Limestone Prison, the boils, the bacterial infections, tuberculosis, hepatitis.
The hepatitis C and the tuberculosis. There was it was a couple of years ago. There was a breakout or an outbreak of tuberculosis in the Alabama prisons, and they spread all over the Alabama prisons. And there were 49 active cases in one prison, and that was at Donaldson, where these people had active tuberculosis, and so they were highly contagious. They were not separated from the people who did not have it. They were kept together. They put the whole camp under quarantine, right? Well, they shouldn't have put the whole camp under quarantine. They should have just put the ones who were sick under quarantine. And there is a treatment for tuberculosis these days. You don't have to die from it anymore. And so what they did was they put these guys who had active tuberculosis in the kitchen to serve food to the rest of the prisoners. And when we reported that to the health department actually said to me, that's not a problem because tuberculosis is airborne. Well, if you read the medical information on tuberculosis, you know darn well you don't want to be serving food to healthy people when you've got tuberculosis, because that's how it spreads. It doesn't spread from the food. It spreads from them breathing on the food. It spreads from them sweating over the food. It spreads from them coughing over the food, and then these guys eat it, and they become sick too.
Absolutely.
But I can't believe that the Alabama Health Department would actually say that's not a problem. They can go ahead and serve food to these guys because it's airborne.
We have cases in different prisons, California, Texas, New York, where people are punished by having their wheelchairs taken from them, cups of urine thrown in their face. We've got murders going on in the United States prisons. Frank Valdez murdered, beaten to a pulp by 8 guards who went on trial, and a jury decided, well, yeah, they killed him, but we can't decide which one killed him. So, I mean, that's the kind of stuff we got going on, not in the Iraqi prisons, and so we're talking about right here. And our president says this is not the American way, when some of the worst abuses in this country occurred under him when he was governor of Texas.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. He's the #1 executioner in the country. George Bush is.
And men were being tasered. We'll be showing a film, hopefully at the welcome reception, that showed under him men were going in, shooting these men with tasers while they were butt naked, treating them like dogs and animals. So I say to you tonight, if you have a loved one in a prison in these United States, do all that you can to get to Washington, D.C., August 13th. Please do that. Stand for them. Stand in the gap for them. Number one, it will mean so much to the people incarcerated. Number two, it will show elected officials. Family members haven't gotten the respect that victim rights groups have gotten because we've held back. I don't know if there was a little shame or whatever connected because our loved ones were supposedly to have committed crimes. But I say to you tonight, you have a right to love your loved one. You have a right to love your son, your husband, your daughter, your wife. No matter what their crime, they should get medical treatment.
That's right. They're not put in prison to be tortured. And also, see, the propaganda that happens is that if you're associated with someone who's in prison, then you're a criminal too. You're just as bad as a criminal. And so there's a stigma attached, which people need to get over. The fact of the matter is that the victims' rights groups should really join us, because if we eliminate the torture, if we eliminate the abuse, then when the people get out, they're not going to be angry people, and most of the people do get out, and people need to remember that.
We're going to talk about that getting out. We got to take a break. We have the 10 o'clock hour. We're going to take a break. It's Harambe Radio, and it's the Journey for Justice Hour. I'm Roberta Franklin, along with Sherry Swiney. Don't forget, 1-800-335-9818. We'll be back. We need to pay some bills. It's Harambe. How about that? I get the swing of this thing yet, Delani. It's the Journey for Justice Hour. I'm Roberta Franklin, along with Sherry Swiney. We're co-conveners of the Journey for Justice March, and right where you are, as a matter of fact. So come on out your homes August 13th and come over to Lafayette Park. We'll be there, and we'll be expecting to see many of you there. If you believe, as we believe, that our prison system is out of control, they're continuing to lock people up by the thousands of minor crimes. If you were to really do an overview or an overhaul of the entire prison system, you will find that thousands and thousands of people could walk out tomorrow with no threat to society at all. We're going to talk a little bit about the drug war that has caused, I think, thousands of people, probably 1 million, to be in prison today, and also about the actual coming home and how this system seems to be designed to set you up to fail. And one of those ways is the actual charge that they've put on me lately. But let's talk about the drug war a little bit, Sherry. When they got so strict with the things like the Rockefeller drug law out in New York and the habitual offender laws here in Alabama, the mandatory minimums, exactly what do you think? You tell me what you think, and I'll tell you what I think this actual war on drugs really is.
Yeah, well, in short, the history of this and how it got started. At one time, the drug that's called marijuana was not illegal. We used it. It was a cash crop. The United States used it for all kinds of things. We called it hemp. And when it was decided to make this drug illegal, they changed the name so that the public wouldn't recognize that it was hemp, because if they had said hemp was going to be illegal, it would have never happened. So you've got poor neighborhoods throughout the country, and the government agencies would go into those neighborhoods and provide these young people with drugs. And then when they were hooked, they pulled out. So what was left for them, they couldn't get these drugs anymore. They were already hooked. And, so they would have to commit some crimes to get their drugs, because they didn't have jobs, they didn't have education, which is another whole facet of this big problem that we have. Mm-hmm. So the war on drugs is not a war on drugs. It's actually a war on the people. This government uses drugs to control other governments, and a lot of people know that, but a lot of people don't. So our CIA uses drugs throughout the world to control other governments, their money and their government, and so they don't really want drugs to be legal because the black market is so lucrative. Now, if the black market were gone, we wouldn't have all the murders, the robberies that we have, because people could get the drugs that they wanted. Other countries are experimenting with this. Switzerland is one, where the drugs are legal. Even hard drugs are legal. They're provided by the government. Even heroin addicts who can go to their government agencies and be provided with this drug in quantities that don't get them so high they can't function, but in quantities that keep them from going through withdrawals, which can be very dangerous. Mm-hmm. So they can still function and they can still work, and they've shown that, if drugs are legalized, the public doesn't automatically become mass drug addicts. I've had people say, "Oh no, we can't legalize drugs because then everybody will get hooked." And my question to them is, well, you're not on drugs now. Are you telling me that if they became legal, you'd all of a sudden become a drug addict? You have no control over your own self? No. But see, we don't think about that.
We don't look at the millions of housewives legally
that are on prescription drugs.
That are on prescription drugs. Legally. The government controls what it wants to control. You clearly have on the side of your cigarette pack Surgeon General's warning. It may cause this, may cause that. The government at any time could ban cigarettes.
Well, the thing of it is, prohibition just does not work. It never has, and it never will. And the government knows that. It didn't work when they tried to put prohibition on alcohol, and so now alcohol is legal. It's highly taxed,
and the leading cause of death, if you want to relate it to drugs, alcohol is the leading cause. It causes more death than the others, but they legalize alcohol. The cigarettes are legal, but according to most studies, cigarettes and alcohol do more harm than any of the others. So the government puts prohibition on what it wants to prohibit. But this so-called war on drugs, the Rockefeller drug laws, we were told at a conference in New York, were put in place so that poor minorities would not come uptown with drugs. It would prohibit them from coming into the other areas. And they put laws so strict that first-time offenders like Elaine Bartlett were given like 25 years for, $25 worth of cocaine or something of that nature. The mandatory minimums where you got 3 felonies, which could be 2 bad checks in a bag of marijuana, and you may have life or life without in prison. It's absolutely ridiculous, the laws that we have set back and allowed this country to do. And the bottom line is the war on drugs has been a war on communities of color, a war on poor communities, a war on people who can't afford to buy justice. Because
Well,
you
and
can't buy justice.
the bottom line even underneath that is that this is part of filling up the prisons because, once again, the commodity is human beings.
Yes.
The more people that you have in prison, the bigger the revenue, the bigger the profit. And that's what I want to stress. Is this is not even about drugs. This is not even about crime. This is about money. This is not about justice. This is about money. And if people can understand, you follow the money, you'll see where the problem lies. This is not about crime. This is not about drugs. You know, it's a business, and it's being run like a business. So the more people you can get to break the law, the more people you can get in prison, and the bigger profits you will get.
And they send such negative messages. We were asking the question the last time on Harambe, and I asked the question, how many whites were on death row for killing a black? Okay? The answer was not many. But you turn around and flip that around and ask, how many blacks are on death row for killing another black? And the answer is still not many.
Right.
So what's the message that sends?
Well, nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
No, that's what the message is. And see, the trick is to make this a racial issue. This is not a racial issue, but the trick is to make it a racial issue so that people will be divided. And when they are divided, they're easily conquered. So the way that I'm looking at it is this is a human being issue. There's no question that there's a disproportionate amount of black people in prison when you compare that to the population. Of course, we all know that. But and there's a disproportionate amount of black people who are in poor communities, who are uneducated or undereducated. There's no question about that. But still, the black people are easy targets. I mean, because they've been raised for how many generations to not want to stand up for themselves.
And I'm more concerned with the message they send due to the fact that most people on death row are either African Americans for killing whites. And the reason I say I'm more concerned with that is with the high number of black-on-black crime, I doubt if you can find a black on death row for killing another black. So the message becomes a black life, it isn't worth it.
The message is that a black life is not important. Well, that's not true.
And I can't stand that. I mean, that's the disproportionate messages that they send out, the mixed signals. It's okay for a black to kill another black, not even worthy of the death penalty.
So I guess my question is, why does a black person kill another black person?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's like hatred within the community, the black community, more than I've seen in other communities. I don't see other ethnic groups hating each other like the black community hates each other.
But then again, that's a learned behavior, I believe.
Yes, I believe so too, and I think it's all mind control, training. If you get a child, they don't know anything about racial discrimination or anything like that. They have to be taught that.
Yes.
Okay, so
and just as African Americans, I believe, were taught to hate each other. They were taught to be distrustful. They were taught. I think all of that was taught.
Well, sure it was. And they were, first of all, they're taught that they're not worth anything. So, their neighbor's not worth anything. Mm-hmm. So what if I kill my neighbor? Nobody's going to care anyway. Mm-hmm. That's the message, and that's dead wrong. They're still human beings. If we look at this as a racial issue, we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot. Mm-hmm. But if we look at this as a human being issue, then we will succeed.
I think that's an important statement. Human being.
Yeah, well, see, I mean, we're all connected in this universe, whether we like it or not. The good, the bad, and the ugly are all connected. We're all made of the same stuff. It doesn't make a bit of difference what color anybody is. We're still human beings. I realized that there was a time when the Anglo-Saxons didn't think so because they were an arrogant bunch of people. But, hopefully we've grown a little bit in the 21st century. At least most people have. There's still some, Neanderthals walking around that don't think so, but they're getting to be a minority themselves. Mm-hmm. So, but the bottom line under even all of that is the money, is the business of prisons.
And that's why we're headed to Washington August 13th for the Journey for Justice. We invite you again, those of you in the Washington audience. You've never heard of us, but you've heard of Delani and Empress T. They're going to be there, and I know they're going to certainly bless us with their words of wisdom. And this is, I think, one of the most wonderful things along this whole entire journey is the wonderful people that we're meeting, Sherry, of all colors, who are coming together under one banner for the same message, and that's to say, this is wrong. This is wrong. I don't care what color you are. If you can look at the prison system in the condition that it's in, and you can't see that it's broke, you can't see that something's wrong, you can't see that they are picking on poor people. This is an economic thing, I think, more so than anything else. There are some people that can buy justice from, cannot. You got the haves and you have the have-nots. And we have sat back, and sadly, our leaders that we, our so-called leaders that we have put in office, have, and one of the other reasons they are ticked at me is I pull records here. I pull records, and I'll tell you who yay the bill and who nay the bill. And for me, some of our African-American leaders here in Montgomery, Alabama, have signed on to some of the most ridiculous bills that were pretty much, they couldn't have done it any better if they would just said, let me sit down and write this for this specific area. Mm-hmm. Simple as that. The enhancement laws here, where you within so many feet of a housing project, so many feet of a this, well, there are no housing projects in certain areas.
Well, and they know that.
And they knew that.
Sure, they know that.
So as an African-American politician, I asked one of our leading ones here, well, I said, well, look, man, you get an additional 10 years here if you're caught with marijuana within so many feet of a housing project. Well, all the housing projects are on one side of town, mine. Mm-hmm. So how in the world could you have yayed that and not realize that this law doesn't apply to the entire city of Montgomery?
Yeah, well...
So we've got to start calling these politicians and things like what you were talking about earlier, abolishing the habeas corpus. If we don't start paying attention to these laws, like you said again, look how they slipped the Patriot Act in.
Oh, yeah, well,
soon they're going to be listening to us.
Even review that when it was passed.
Pretty soon they're going to be listening to us in the bathroom.
That's unheard of in this country. I mean, the country is, the Constitution is, just about toast. And our rights have been taken away slowly but surely over the years, and now it's to the point where it can be blatant, and there's really not a lot of people paying attention.
Yeah.
If everybody paid attention, then they wouldn't be able to do this. Yeah. Or if they did do it, they'd have a civil war on their hands, and I'm sure they don't want that. But another thing about the prison industry and the fuel that continues to run it is groups like the victims' rights groups. We work real hard in our group. We don't want to see any more victims of crime. Nobody does. But the victims' rights groups, they have a lot of backing. They have a loud voice, and they are actually, in my opinion, being victimized 2 or 3 times over, because the news media likes to sensationalize the crime, they support the victims' rights groups, and the victims' rights groups want to, not all of them, but they want to keep people in prison for the rest of their lives. What I'm trying to say to them is, understand that if the prison system starts rehabilitation, so that when a person gets out of prison they don't go back, then the communities are actually going to be safer, and there won't be any more victims of crime. if you continue to support torture and medical abuse and harassment and dehumanization of these people who are in prison, when they do get out, they're very angry people. They don't know how to get their life put back together again. They don't have any support group to help them get back into society again. And they are very likely to go through the revolving door again, which means there will be more victims. They're going to commit another crime, and there will be another victim of crime.
Well,
so
Sherry,
yes.
Believe it or not, I'm having to be vacated for another place whose my timing was off altogether, and I'm almost 30 minutes late for them. And I'm going to have to say goodnight tonight to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having us on. And
tell everybody the website, though. Tell everybody your website.
It's patrickcrusade.org, and it is linked to the Journey for Justice that is telling everybody all about the march. And we sure hope that, you'll go take a look at that website and decide to come.
And we'll be here next Thursday, same time, on Harambe Radio. And as it gets closer and closer to the march, we invite you again, if you're in the Washington area, wherever you are listening, if you can, join us in Lafayette Park in Washington, D.C. on August 13th, starting at 9 a.m. And that Friday at 5 p.m. we'll be at the City Hall on 1350 Pennsylvania Avenue. We're excited about it. Again, we just have so much love for Jelani, Harambe Radio, Empress Chi, and everybody there. They've been so kind and so wonderful to us, and we just can't ever thank them enough. They don't realize it, Sherry, but Harambe Radio is stuck with Roberta.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for supporting this march. It's very important to us.
It is.
We appreciate your help.
And we can't thank them enough, and I thank you all so much. We got to say goodnight and move on, but we'll be back on next Thursday right here on Harambe Radio. And make sure you keep it tuned to Harambe Radio, because you get a lot of interesting and insightful information on Harambe Radio. And again, we're so very, very grateful to have been here tonight. Okay? God bless.
Good night.